It's kind of crazy how a popular brand or franchise can fall so far from grace that YouTube channels that were made specifically to talk about that brand or franchise no longer want to talk about it. That's exactly where I find myself with Star Wars and Star Wars games, to where on this channel I would much rather talk about waifu games or Souls-likes or a game that's based on a brand infinitely more popular than Star Wars right now. In this video, I kind of just want to rant about the state of Star Wars games in 2025, sort of where we're at right now and where we're headed. And this is going to be completely unfiltered, it's just off the cuff. But if you like these kinds of rants, then give it a thumbs up and maybe I'll do some more. So when I started this channel, it was right at the beginning of Battlefront 2's life cycle. I was a couple of months late to it. I think Battlefront 2 dropped in November of 2017 and I started making content in like February of 2018, so a couple months removed. But I started making content under the impression that we were going to have years, if not decades, of Star Wars video game content to make videos on. And the reason for that was because of EA's acquisition of the exclusivity rights. For the next 10 years, EA was going to be the only ones making Star Wars games. And at the time, that seemed like an exciting prospect. EA had its reputation, but we also knew it as one of the juggernauts of the gaming world. And if anybody could pump out a bunch of quality Star Wars games, it would likely be them. And they had their hits. You know, the games have their critics, but I personally think both EA Battlefront games are spectacular and they still hold up today. If you're a critic of those games, I challenge you, go back and just try them. They're not all bad. The Jedi series from Respawn, smash hit games. Both Fallen Order and Survivor are excellent. Star Wars Squadrons, I didn't have a lot of nice things to say about it when it first launched, mostly because I was bitter about Battlefront 2's live service being cut for it. You know, it felt like they were taking away my steak and giving me a corn dog instead. But the game itself is gorgeous, it plays really well, and it's a phenomenal flight simulator. They've got the wins under their belt, but they've also got the losses. EA canceled basically just as many games as they released. They were supposed to launch one game a year, that seemed to be the plan, and they ended up with just about half of that. Not all EA's fault, to be completely fair. From what I understand, the approval process, and I remembered this from Battlefront 2's heyday, the approval process from Lucasfilm to EA to the actual game itself took forever, and apparently working with Lucasfilm was kind of a drag, just because it took so long to get the okay to do things. So there's blame to be shared across the board, but EA's legacy with those 5 games, it's not all bad. You know, the Battlefronts, the Jedis, and Squadrons, those are a bright spot on Star Wars gaming history, especially when you compare it to where we're at today, which is just mid. I was trying to find a word to describe just how I feel about Star Wars games right now in 2025, and it's just mid. Look at what we've got to work with. We've got Star Wars Outlaws that came out last year, not a success by any metric. We had Star Wars Hunters that came out shortly after that. Or was it before? I don't even know. I don't even remember when Star Wars Hunters dropped because I'm just that far disconnected from this franchise, let alone that game. The Battlefront Classic Collection, that was supposed to be a hit, man. I was hyped for that. I got to relive my childhood. That just ended up being a flop. Star Wars Outlaws ended up being a flop. Hunters is basically a flop. I mean, look at Star Wars Hunters and look at something like Marvel Rivals. They're basically the exact same game, mechanically speaking. I mean, they're both hero, team-based arena shooters, but just look at the difference in what those games do. You've got, on one hand, you've got Marvel Rivals, which has all familiar characters, well, mostly familiar characters. You've got some new faces like Jeff the Land Shark, Luna Snow, characters that most people probably wouldn't be familiar with, but you've got all the major names. You've got Captain America, Iron Man, Wolverine, Spider-Man, all major players in the Marvel Universe. And then you look at Star Wars Hunters, which again is more or less the exact same concept, just with Star Wars. We don't know any of these people. Sure, they've got a Wookiee. Sure, they've got a Jawa. They've got some familiar species from the Star Wars universe, but it's not Chewbacca. You know, it's not anybody that we're familiar with. There's no Han Solo, no Luke Skywalker. There's nothing that anybody is familiar with and they can form that emotional attachment to, or at least pull from an emotional attachment that's already there. Luke Skywalker is my all-time favorite Star Wars character. If he were a playable character in Hunters, I'd be all over that game. It's why I would much rather play HVV in Battlefront 2. I can play Luke in that game. Hunters specifically has a whole list of issues outside of just unfamiliar characters. When it launched, it only came out on 2 platforms. It was on mobile and Switch, which is such a strange business decision if you ask me. Why not just release it for every major console? It's decisions like that that really make me question what is happening behind the scenes. Just why? Where were the brains in that decision-making process? As far as I can see, there were none involved. Hunters is fine for what it is. It's just a shame that we have an example of that exact same genre, basically that exact same game, exploding in popularity with Marvel rivals. And then you've got Hunters over here on the side just waving its little flag, cheering on its big brother. It's just sad how far Star Wars has fallen. Hunters should be on that same page. It should be a rival to rivals, but it's not. And it's never going to be. And that's kind of how I feel about Outlaws, too. I mean, Outlaws was supposed to be a huge hit for Ubisoft. This is open world Star Wars we're talking about. And we ended up just getting a very mid experience. It's got some glimmers of fun. The immersion's good, but the gameplay itself is... it's shit. You're scraping the bottom of the barrel when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws. It's just not a good game. And that's really where we're at in 2025 with Star Wars games. We've got 2 games that are currently ongoing, Hunters and Outlaws, if you even want to call Outlaws ongoing. It's not like it's a live service game like Battlefront 2 was, for example. But those are the only 2 that we've got at the moment, and they're not doing very well. Partly a symptom of their own design, but also just because of where the franchise is in the eyes of everybody. I mean, Star Wars is bottom tier right now, and we have Lucasfilm and their shitty decisions to thank for that. Now, we've kind of been looking back this entire time. I want to change our perspective and shift eyes forward, because the future actually has a couple of bright spots that I want to talk about. The first one being the Amy Hennig Star Wars game from Skydance New Media. Skydance is Amy Hennig's new studio, and she's the brains behind the Uncharted franchise. You tell me the people who made Uncharted are making a Star Wars game, I'm all ears. That's got me perked up. We sadly know nothing about this game other than it is in development. I'm hoping to hear something within the next year, hopefully, ideally. I'm not holding my breath. But Skydance Star Wars is hype. That's a bright spot. Jedi 3 by Respawn is still in the works also. That's going to round out the Jedi trilogy nice and neat. And if it's anything like the first 2 games, we already know that one's going to be amazing. Although we did lose Stig, who was I believe he was the creative director, or maybe he was the CEO. I can't remember his position in Respawn exactly. He was one of the higher-ups, though. And it was sort of his vision that helped shape the first 2 Jedi games. So with him being gone now, it's a little bit up in the air how Jedi 3 is going to look. But again, if it's anything like the first 2, it'll be just fine. Oh, we just recently got this news about the real-time strategy game coming out of BitReactor and Respawn. It's being published by Respawn, but developed by BitReactor. And this game is allegedly, according to this rumor, going to be revealed at Star Wars Celebration this year. So we do have some good news to look forward to there. I've actually been really hyped on this RTS game. I think RTS and Star Wars go together like PB&J. I mean, we've got the Empire at War game, which is iconic and holds up even today. We had Star Wars Commander on mobile, which was sort of that base defense game. All fantastic, and being put in that position, that same kind of position that Grand Admiral Thrawn has, where you're commanding military factions and you're setting up your defenses and getting your vehicles in the right spot and building turrets, and it's all so cool, man. I love real-time strategy within the context of Star Wars. I think that is perfect. Can't wait for this game. And we also can't forget about the KOTOR remake. I was going to make a video dedicated just to KOTOR and the RTS game, but I figured I would just include all the information in this rant because why not? But the KOTOR remake is absolutely still happening, and we have some good news on that front. I made a video about it months ago, but the video didn't get a lot of traction. Basically, we all know KOTOR remake is being made by Saber Interactive, same guys who just put out War Machine. Same guys who just put out Warhammer 40K. Space Marine 2. That game was a hit, and the chief creative officer of Saber was saying that because Space Marine 2 was so popular and it was such a good release, it bodes really, really well for all of the future projects that the studio is working on, and that includes the KOTOR remake. We haven't heard any official news on the remake in what feels like months, but that was the latest update, and even though he wasn't directly talking about the KOTOR remake, it's definitely implied. So honestly, between those 5 games, the RTS game, the Amy Hennig game, Jedi 3, KOTOR remake, and Eclipse, whenever those last 2 come out, it's actually looking pretty good. It's just a question of whether or not they actually will be good when they drop, because we kind of had the same thoughts about Outlaws. And it's also a question of whether they're going to come out in the first place, because we all know Star Wars games have a horrible habit of getting canceled. Just ask 1313. It just sucks not having the same level of passion that I did in the past. I used to be excited to make videos on Star Wars games, and I guess I was kind of excited to make this video, but it's not coming from the same place of passion. This is coming more from resentment and feelings that I've had bottled up for a long time, and I just never really talked about it in a video before. I'm a Star Wars video game YouTuber who doesn't want to make content on Star Wars video games anymore. It's a conundrum. That's why I'm not really considering myself a Star Wars YouTuber anymore. I'll still make videos on Star Wars games as they drop. Hell, I'll even make videos on the movies or TV shows if it appeals to me. But that's not the only thing I'm doing anymore. I'm definitely branching out and doing other things. Just because I can't sit around and wait for Star Wars to get its head out of its ass. I can't wait for this brand to be successful again, for me to be successful. You know what I mean? I've got to take care of myself and do what's best for me. And right now, what's best for me is not Star Wars, which is why I haven't been focusing on it. Marvel Rivals. That's what's popping. That's what's getting me views. The First Descendant, even though it's dead as a doornail, I'm still getting more views on First Descendant videos than I am on Star Wars videos, and that should tell you something. It's gotten so bad that I'm even seriously considering rebranding this entire channel. I mean, if you look at my logo, if you look at the header picture, you look at the most popular videos on the channel, anybody who's new would come into it and be like, oh yeah, this is obviously a Star Wars guy. And I don't really want that anymore. I'd rather be known as a more general gaming channel that focuses on popular games that people are enjoying instead of a hyper-specific niche, you know? I'm a little optimistic about the future, but to be completely honest, I'm pretty much checked out of this franchise. It's been really hard to care about Star Wars when every single project that has come out recently has been a disappointment, and that extends beyond the video games. That goes for the shows and the movies, too. People are talking about the Acolyte killing Star Wars, but for me personally, it was Obi-Wan Kenobi. I was already at the point where I was considering not being a Star Wars fan anymore, and a lot was riding on Kenobi. Like, that show had to be perfect. They had to nail that show. Everything about that had to be perfect because I was already on the edge with Star Wars, and then Kenobi dropped, and as usual, it was very mid, and ever since, I've just been checked out. The Acolyte didn't bug me as much as it bugged other people because I was already at that point where people got to with the Acolyte. You know what I mean? I've been checked out. I've been checked out, man. It's not good. But I think that's really all I wanted to talk about. I just really wanted to talk about where we were at with Star Wars games and why I haven't been making videos on them. You know, I'll make videos on the new games when they drop, but I'm not going to be exclusively focusing on Star Wars anymore, just because I can't. I can't do it, man. It's not good for my mental, it's not good for my psyche, and it's not good for my bottom line either. But hey, if you made it this far in the video, shout out to you. Much love and appreciation for your loyal viewership. Truly, it's because of you guys that I even get to do this, making money, talking into a microphone about video games of all things. So hey, thanks. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed my rant. Give it a thumbs down if you didn't like it. And if you're new, consider subscribing and getting notified. This has been Star. Keep shining, baby.